Awesome. I would like to welcome the first speaker of the Affirmative team to the floor to start the debate off.
Look, when New Zealand's 300 wealthiest people literally pay less in tax than people who aren't earning enough money to survive, I think that's principally so unfair. We're so proud to stand for a progressive tax system that reduces this inequality. 3 things to do for you in my speech today. Firstly, on setup. Secondly, on how we benefit those on the margins of society. And thirdly, on how we reduce social division. Okay, firstly on setup and starting with our model, broadly 4 things here. Firstly, for poor individuals, we want to reduce the amount of tax they pay under the status quo. This is extremely significant for them because, even if it's only a small decrease, like $200, can be the difference between whether or not you can put food on the table for your family. Secondly, for the middle class, we would like the tax to stay relatively similar. We don't think they can feasibly pay too much more because, we talk about a squeezed middle, but we also don't think they need any tax breaks particularly highly. Thirdly, for rich individuals, we want tax to get significantly higher. We're happy to stand by a very large amount of tax, even if it's 50% or more. And just note here, when we're talking about rich individuals, we're not talking about your dad who makes $140,000 a year working for the university. We're talking about people who make millions and millions of dollars, and this is the difference between whether you have 1 super yacht or 3, right? And then finally, on corporations, we want to also tax massive conglomerates, massive amounts of money. Obviously, this is dependent on how big the conglomerate is, and we're very happy to tax Amazon 60% or whatever, and then smaller companies less proportionately. And then just secondly, on framing, we think that this debate affects the entirety of the world, given that every single country has a low income group who can benefit from this. Every single country has higher income individuals, right? I'll take a POI before I move on.
What gives money value?
I think money has value because it enables you to buy goods, right? Okay. So secondly then, on how this benefits those on the margins. For context here, we think that people who are on the margins typically don't have money, whether this is because they're marginalised due to class or they're marginalised for other reasons that don't enable them to earn a lot of money. Maybe this looks like you're an African-American woman, so you get paid a lot less. Maybe this looks like you're disabled, so you can't work, and there's a very inaccessible industry, right? And we also think that these people are typically bigger users of social supports like free universal healthcare, like free education, right? Okay, with that in mind, broadly 3 benefits we can provide to these groups. Firstly, we think that low-income individuals simply have more cash in hand. This means 2 things. 1, they're better able to afford their basic needs. This looks like being able to pay your electricity bill in the middle of winter so you don't get sick. This looks like being able to put food in your child's lunchbox so they're not sitting at school wondering why they're the only person who literally doesn't have anything to eat and struggling to focus in class because they haven't eaten in 8 hours, right? And then secondly, we think we're also better able to help them break out of toxic cycles of poverty, because when you have more money, because you're not just trying to scrape by, maybe you're more likely to be able to go into higher education and get a higher paying job, or you're more likely, for people who are a bit older, you're more likely to be able to recertify or get upskill to make more money. Okay, secondly, we think that the money is likely to be invested into social supports. Even if you don't think it only goes to these things, when the government simply has more money to spend, it is likely to be able to spend more money on healthcare, more money on education, more money on welfare, more money on roads, because those are the things that constituents care about, right? This means that more support is given to those who need it. That looks like being able to better afford pensions in an aging society where it's not very long until we will literally not have enough people working to be able to afford to help elderly people live, right? This looks like being able to help people afford to buy insulin so they're not literally going into a coma because they were trying to ration it, right? Thirdly, we think that we can provide a massive mental benefit. The reasons for this are twofold. 1, we think that these people have a very justified mistrust towards the government and towards society. Maybe this is because you were colonized, you've literally been oppressed by your government for centuries. Maybe this is because of historic inequity. Maybe this is because you've just been denied help in the past, right? So we think that when the government is now demonstrating an active desire to support you, you trust it more. But secondly, we think that marginalized individuals often have much worse mental health under the status quo. Why? Because being poor is a massive stressor. I think wondering whether or not you're going to be able to eat next week is probably not very good for your general well-being. And also, I already outlined for you, a lot of these people are discriminated against in other ways, and any burden we can take off them is a massive win. This looks like people being less stressed. This looks like people having a better quality of life. Maybe at our most extreme, this looks like people literally being able to live, right? So what are the outcomes here? We think, one, there's an improved quality of life financially. This is a massive, tangible benefit to these people, and it's probably the biggest benefit in a debate, right? Because at the point in time where you can literally stop people from dying, when you can make people better able to live a good life, that's something I think everybody can agree is good. But secondly, improved opportunity. I think this is also really beneficial because it means over time people have to rely less on these social supports. And just finally, on better trust in the government. This means the government is better able to enact policies like progressive tax when people know that the government is actually trying to help them. Okay, just a little bit of weighing here. I think principally this is really important. And why should it be tax and not charity or something? We don't think it's fair for poor people to have to rely on the whims of the rich to survive, right? We all think these people are the most vulnerable in society, and the government has a principal obligation to protect them. And we think that simply saving lives and improving the quality of people's lives is a massive benefit. I think I probably care a lot more about somebody being able to feed their children, about somebody being able to pay for their medical bills, and I care about whether or not a rich person can go to Cancun for their holiday. Okay, yeah, I'll take a pill over for everyone.
How does the economy grow?
So we think when poor people are able to spend more money, this actually puts money into the economy. When people are spending more, that's beneficial to the economy because they're engaging and interacting with businesses more, right? Okay. But secondly, on how we reduce social division. Okay, for context here, we think there's a lot of animosity and distrust from poor people towards the rich, just because, I think it's very hard to feel sympathetic towards somebody who looks like their life has been handed to them on a silver platter when you're struggling to, survive, right? And secondly, we think that rich people typically don't see the cycles of inequality because they're very far removed from the lives of the people who are struggling. This means it's easy to assume that they're lazy, that they just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps to get by. With that in mind, how do we affect the way low income, middle income, and higher income people act? Firstly, on lower income people, we think that the less well off and they are now able to see that the rich people are actually actively benefiting their lives. This reduces feelings of inequality towards the rich, but it also just means that people feel like they're on a more equal playing field, and we think principally we care a lot about equality, so that's a very good thing. Secondly, we think middle income people will be unlikely to have a massively negative reaction towards poor people getting tax breaks. This has two reasons for this. One, you're far closer to being homeless than you ever are to being a billionaire. It's literally one medical emergency away when your insurance won't pay for you to become somebody who's more marginalized. It's very difficult for an average middle income person to suddenly become Jeff Bezos, right? But secondly, they're also happy to see the rich be taxed more because it benefits them directly. This looks like better education for their kids, also better healthcare, all those things that people care a lot about. And then finally, on rich people, there are two benefits to their views here. One, they are more likely to ask why this policy is actually needed, so that opens their eyes to these systemic inequalities. But also they see people actually being able to make their lives better. This probably reduces their preconceived notions of poor people as just lazy or not as hard working as they are. So proud to stand.
Alright, I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite the first speaker of the negative team to the floor.
Global economies are in a critical position where we rely on a stable income from everyone. When the system gets uprooted, Team Hawke's Bay tells you that we will get non-compliance from the wealthy, which affects the livelihoods of the poor. 3 points on this today. Firstly, why significantly increasing the tax system just won't work. And secondly, how even if it does work, it's going to create more harm than the affirmative team is willing to grapple with. Thirdly, Isabella will provide a split on how it's going to actually negatively affect the middle class. 4 points of setup today before I continue. Firstly, what does the tax system look like today? It looks like different income groups being taxed different percentages. People with lower income do get taxed proportionately less, around 10.5% of their income. Secondly, we do actually stand for an enhanced status quo. This looks like more government resources going into tax fraud, tax evasion, because we recognise that tax evasion and loopholes can be found on both sides of the house. We see this as very important in today's debate, so we're going to put barriers in place for it. Thirdly, what do these rich people look like? It can be a diverse range of people because there are less obstacles in the way for like a wider range of people to achieve wealth today. But secondly, we see that rich people want to keep their wealth, to perpetrate this wealth. This looks like investments and estates. Fourthly, not all countries have a progressive tax system at all, so we do see that this move doesn't actually apply to developing countries. Before I continue, some rebuttal. Firstly, on the idea that we're going to get more money for the poor. I've just laid out my points for you, so I will go on to talk to you about why this system won't work, but also on the response to the POI about how our economy grows. Now, the affirmative team said that poor people spending more money is going to grow our economy. We tell you this simply isn't true because poor people aren't fueling the economy. They aren't buying luxury items that are going to make a difference. They're going to be buying subsidised bread because they just cannot afford to fuel the economy. Therefore, the people who are fueling the economy is more likely to be rich people, is more likely to be people in the middle class. So we don't see any of these benefits. Also, the idea that the behaviours of rich people are going to change to the fact that they're not going to think that the poor are lazy and the stereotype isn't going to be perpetrated. We see this as completely not true. As when the rich people are getting taxed more to provide benefits for poorer people, they're going to be almost enhancing these stereotypes, not diminishing them. Also, the idea in their model that it's going to be millionaires and billionaires only. This minimises any benefits that they can create because the top 1% doesn't actually make up that many people. Not many people are billionaires, so if you only tax them, you're not actually getting as much tax as we think. No, thank you. On to my first point about why this is simply not going to work. In order for this to make sense, we do actually need to get more money in the tax system. 3 reasons why this doesn't happen. Firstly, is why where rich people are keeping their money. Majority of rich people made and keep their money in stock markets, like Warren Buffett. But why? Is because this is a lucrative business and they are incredibly smart people and know how to minimize their tax because, like I've already said, they want to keep their wealth. How? They don't put millions of dollars into banks because they know because of interest rates it isn't worth it. And we see that money kept in banks for rich people just loses its value. So where do they keep their money? They keep it in bonds, they keep it in property, they keep it in trust funds and stocks. What this means is that their wealth isn't actually getting taxed. When you increase progressivity of tax systems, rich people are more likely to fuel their money into this and evade the tax. They have more of an incentive to do this because they want to keep their wealth. Most countries don't want to have a capital gains tax because it's unpopular with the rich constituencies that fund their parties. Secondly, on rich people leaving and taking their money with them. When we increase tax, it sends messages to the rich that you don't want them, right? Because they feel very personally victimized because money is basically their only personality trait. This means that the rich are more inclined to uproot their business, uproot their wealth, and take their money to places like Switzerland, tax havens, where they can hide their money with countries with more loopholes that they can exploit to keep their wealth. This leaves domestic economies struggling because they aren't receiving any tax from these people and can't fund key things that need. Key things that the affirmative team care about, like healthcare and education. We see them as necessary, so we do need tax money coming in, and anything is better than nothing. When we increase their tax rate, government is going to rely highly on tax advisors to create this better system, especially when we're significantly increasing it in the way that the affirmative team suggests. This means we already see problems under the status quo when this happens. We see the CWC tax scandal where advisors ended up just talking to their wealthy clients about how they can minimize tax. When these tax advisors are working more with the government to create this more progressive, significant progressive tax system, we see that this is more likely to happen often because the clients have more an incentive to keep their money, the tax advisors want to keep their wealthy clients. We can see that this is only going to perpetrate more, and this has many negative effects because it's going to increase corruption within these systems. On our side, we get incremental change, which means not only are we less likely to see corruption from tax advisors because they aren't as involved, it means that we're also less likely to see any backslide in this, and we can actually make change that is sustainable. After this point, we have just proved to you that this new system is going to get less tax. Economies rely on this tax to provide essential services, to provide benefits, to provide education, to provide healthcare. On our side, we can actually get these tangible benefits because the money stays in the country, it stays in our economy, and it's less likely to be fueled into finding loopholes on how to get out of it.
On that.
Yeah, I will actually take a POI now.
Okay, to a rich person, which is more important, the increase in marginal utilities between spending 100 and 101 million or avoiding backlash and playing a role in their local society?
I think for rich people, it's more important to keep their money, to get more wealth than it is backlash in their society. I genuinely don't think rich people care about their communities that much. Secondly, on the harms, even if this money does stay in our economy, I just need to prove to you that it won't be productive. 3 reasons for this. Firstly, on how companies are going to cut corners in order to increase their profit. Large CEOs, when they are taxed more, are going to be more incentivized to cut corners because they want to keep their profit margins high. Rich people want to keep their wealth. Businesses want to be making more profit. All right. So when we see this, they want to keep this revenue profit gapping increase. When we see that they're being taxed more, profit is obviously going to be going down, right? So what are CEOs likely to do? They're likely to cut corners to maximize their profit. This looks like laying off workers. It looks like upping their prices. This is going to have many flow-on effects to poor people in our society, to just general society, these people that aren't super rich, that we can see what this means that the economy becomes less productive. We get less transactions. We get workers losing their jobs. It leads to a recession. On our side, this doesn't happen because currently the tax system satisfies the rich. This means people keep their jobs. More people get jobs. This means prices stay reasonably, obviously there's bad stuff happening with inflation, right? But we can only see this is going to increase on their side of the house. Second, how we will get a stagnant economy. We proved a lot of this money is being hidden in investments and other areas like that don't get taxed. This means there's less money in banks, which means the value of money will overall decrease because we can get less transactions, less money going into small businesses. What this means is that local banks are more likely to fail. The government has to pay them out. They don't have enough tax to do that. We see this having flow-on effects to our society because people lose trust in banks, lose trust in government, and overall get more angry. We can also see that rich people in places like the US own a lot of important utilities, such as private hospitals. When they see they're getting taxed more, what's the chances that their main response, or they're going to get super angry about this, there's a chance that they can end up boycotting. So we see that at the end of this, we get a better economy that's actually sustainable. The mooch shall fall.
I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite the second speaker of the Affirmative team to the floor.
This table is so small.
The only harm Hawke's Bay was actually able to prove was that they maybe got a slight decrease in tax systems. Look, I don't think that's enough to win them today. We told you that minorities are likely to be able to buy more food, are likely to not starve at school, are likely to be able to get more jobs because they're able to afford a suit to go to an interview so that people aren't systemically looking at them negatively. Look, I think those are always much more important impacts. Even if you think that's marginal, even if you think that's unlikely, I think that's always going to be more important. What will I do in my speech today? Firstly, talk to you about if it works or not. Secondly, on do we hurt the economy? Thirdly, on backlash. Fourthly, I'll split on how the rich benefit, and then fifthly, if I get time, I'll talk about the harms they try to prove in their second point. Alright, firstly, on will it work? Look, what do they tell us? They tell us that rich people have wealth and other things. Look, I think we told you at Clara that we're likely to tax corporate profits, and that means that because it is likely where these rich people are getting a lot of their money from, you're still likely to reap a lot of those tax benefits. But look, even if you believe all of Hawke's Bay analysis, I think taxing corporate entities probably just gives you a lot more money in the tax system, right? I think at the point in time in which you're literally Disney and you're getting taxed way more, that's always going to be a much important benefit. But look, we tell you that multinational corporations that are literally massive probably have enough tax in which the government is going to pay incredible amounts of attention to them in general. But secondly, we tell you, on individuals, we can just tax their assets, right? The government is aware when somebody buys a house, they're aware when somebody has market in the stock, value in the stock market, and I think that means they're probably going to be able to know that they can tax that value as well. I think what that means is a lot of that material falls out at the point in time that the government knows what people buy and such are likely to be able to tax that. Secondly then, on brain drain, look, they tell us that our model doesn't work because developing countries don't have increased tax systems. Look, that's just wrong. That's just how tax works in most countries. You have brackets that go up in time. I think that's just genuinely how tax works in most countries. I think that means that this moot is relatively international. But even if it's not, look, why does brain drain not happen? I think there's just benefits to staying in your own country, right? You have your family and social perception and attitudes probably benefit you. Secondly, we tell you that your careers and social groups are established in this particular setting, and that means it's much more expensive to move, much more expensive personally to be able to re-establish your entire life, to build it back up from the ground, to re-establish your social circle that you're literally leaving. But secondly, we just tell you that more taxes don't really lead to a tangible harm for these people, and such are likely to get less brain drain even if you buy their analysis about developing countries, because we tell you that these people, the difference is buying a super yacht or not buying a super yacht. Look, I think rich people can just go without buying a super yacht. What that means is you're unlikely to have brain drain, and that neck falls out. Lastly, then on corruption, look, we tell you that because more tax is being made, government is going to pay much more attention to these rich people in general. Look, I think at the point in time in which you have a very high salary and the government wants to get your money, they're probably going to pay a lot of attention for you. That means it's going to be incredibly hard for you to be able to cut corners at the point in time that the government and people and society in general is just paying a lot of attention to you. Look, that looks like Donald Trump and the fact that there was so much attention on him being able to get his tax evasions because people were incredibly mad about it. I think that's the type of thing you get with people like the Disney CEO, with people like what is the CEO like Fonterra or something. But secondly, we tell you that look, people just don't want to break the law, right? I think most people are probably happy to pay a little bit amount of tax when it's not actually going to affect their life that much and such, able to do that. Alright, secondly on backlash, but before that, yes. Sorry.
How does income inequality materialize?
Look, I think income equality materializes at the point in time that you have more income, at the point in time that there's better healthcare for you, at the point in time that you get better education for your children because the government has more money to be able to invest in those things and such you're able to get that. Okay, on backlash, look, I feel like this is a lot of their case. They say that rich people are going to get mad and such they're not going to hire minorities and things like that, and that hurts them. Firstly, I think that tax is normally perceived as relatively just. Look, that sounds like an assertion. Let me prove that to you. I think that only the insanely rich people get taxed significantly more. That means that, as they said themselves, it's a very small group of people, so the impact they have is probably relatively marginal. Another layer to this is that normal income people already don't buy into the mega rich. Look, no one listens to Mark Zuckerberg because people just think he's kind of strange and out of touch with society, and that means you're unlikely to listen to them even if they are incredibly mad at you. But then we tell you that this is actively done to help people on the margins. The government is likely to tell you that this is done to help people on the margins in order to create a narrative to reduce the backlash that they that they wanted to prove. Look, I think rich people are human. They have sympathy. They're likely to want to help make equality at the point in time that helps their brand image if you think that they're selfish in general, so they get more money. Secondly, then we tell you that society is generally liberalizing. That's true because more people are in higher education and social movements push for equality. That means that there's a higher level of understanding of systemic factors, and that's likely to help. But look, let me flip this to you and show where they actually get more backlash on their side of the house in the long term. 3 reasons for this. I think A, the longer this goes on with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer is incredibly harmful, and that means that tension just grows in the long term. It means that poor people are likely to get more and more mad. But look, B, we tell you that people feel more and more marginalised. Look, I think that's a big enough harm to win the debate on our side, at the point in time that people feel useless in society. They feel like they're not providing enough. They feel like they're just like a burden. I feel like that's a big enough benefit to help us win this point. But we tell you that, see, this literally likes like to materializing to like people like attacking the rich, like, I don't know, throwing tomatoes at them, just being mad at them in general. I think that means that the rich have like incentives to not do this in the long term. And secondly, then, on do we hurt the economy? What do they tell us? Basically that we have like this capacity to grow, there's less incentives to create businesses, and that like it's only rich people, right? Couple mix here. I think firstly there's incentives for the rich to create wealth on either side. It's right roughly symmetrical. 4 reasons for this. I think you have more income, it still means more money, even if you're getting taxed more, and that means you're still likely to create more things like that. But we tell you that B, you just have power when you're rich, right? Even if that's just social influence because you have a lot of money, because you're wearing a nice suit, I think that means that people probably listen to you more. C, we tell you about like ambition and growth, people just like to create, and D, like on fame and reputation, that's material I gave you earlier. Secondly, we tell you that rich, like you're just helping the disadvantaged, right? That's true for 3 reasons. I think A, you just have more human capital. That sounds bad, but I think it means that you're more able to work because you're able to afford something like a nanny at the point in time that 10% is actually a lot of your income. And I think what that means is you're able to afford a nanny so you can probably go into work more regularly, and that's really, really important. Look, end of that, I think also a massive proportion of jobs are in governmental facilities, and that means you're likely to be able to get more jobs at the point in time that the government has a marginal increase in income, even if you buy the material. Alright then, onto the split about how the rich benefit. I think firstly the context here is that people currently view the rich as A, like incredibly selfish and self-centered, B, that they're relatively removed from society, and C, that they're disillusioned with the lives of others. What are the mix of this? I tell you that firstly, society sees rich people as paying their fair share on our side of the house. Look, even if that's not true, that's a societal perception. What that means is that A, people genuinely care about fairness a lot and put a lot of weight in it in their lives. They probably get incredibly upset when they think society is against them. But B, we tell you that this is especially true at the point in time that they think it's like negatively affecting them, right? The point in time they think they're not getting the same level of healthcare because they're not able to afford to go privately. At the point in time that they think their children aren't getting a good education because of this. We tell you that secondly then, poor people aren't able to provide the same experiences. Look, I think that means they're more likely to get mad at rich people. At the point in time they feel jealous, at the point in time they feel worthless. That means that they're going to be upset that their kids can't go on school camps. Look, that's a marginal difference that happens on our side. I think 10% means you probably can afford things like school camps, and that's incredibly beneficial. What are the outcomes here? We tell you that first, rich people feels better, so I think that also deals with the backlash and means that aren't likely to like go through loopholes. But we tell you that secondly, the rich aren't getting told off from people, and that just means they feel better. Proud to stand.
I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite to the floor the second speaker of the Negative team.
The Affirmative's case revolves entirely around the point that you increase tax, you get more money. Simple, right? No, not simple. And I'll be explaining through my speech how ultimately increasing tax brackets just makes it much worse for the people that they claim to want to care about, the poor. A couple of things that I will be discussing in my rebuttal. Firstly, I'll be talking about like the overall point, does increasing progressivity lead to more money in government? Secondly, I'll be discussing about the minorities and like some of the points they bring up about like lowering the tax brackets for minorities and how that's actually going to impact them. Then thirdly, I'm going to be discussing the stereotypes and around the stereotypes of the rich people. And then I'll be touching on economic growth and like the ability of the government to create like a positive spin on this when they try to implement before I move on to my split. So to start off with, on the does increasing progressivity actually lead to more money for the government? We heard from the affirming team that basically you just get more money and you can spend it on things like social support, insulin, etc. They gave lots of outcomes there. What they failed to provide us with is actual mechanisms as to why increasing progressivity leads to more money, how this is actually going to work and why people are actually going to end up paying this money. Okay, one of the things they did tell us is that like people don't want to break the law. Okay, maybe people don't want to break the law, but loopholes exist. People don't need to break the law in order to like not be paying the money in the tax. And secondly, say there aren't loopholes. As we provided you as Ella at first, that means they move to countries because they have the ability to do so to actually like go and seek out these loopholes. This means that we just lose the tax money. We don't even get it that they're claiming to want to have on their side of the house. Furthermore, we had heaps of mechanisms at Ella about like how they lead to the loopholes. They don't get the money that like they want to be taxed. It's just like heaps of mechanisms we provided you at first unresponded to. And like furthermore, we think that like this backslide and outrage in general from the rich is just like they have huge lobbying power like in governments. That what does this mean? This means like when they have this money and this ability to lobby governments, it means that like when they're like trying to increase tax, they're like likely to find like other ways to get more loopholes to like be able to just pay less tax in general, because as we've characterized down the line so far, rich people want to keep their money. So at the end of this point, you can see that like increasing progressivity just doesn't actually lead to more money for the government to do all the things that they claim to want to be able to do. And then secondly, on the minorities. So they basically told us that minorities are the people who matter in this debate because they're on the social support and they're going to be benefiting from this. Why isn't this? Well, firstly, we tell you that like minorities aren't all poor. Why is this? Well, because like the evolution of our society makes it a lot more easier for them to make money. What does this mean? We see things like such as Sharesies or like more accessible investor apps that makes it easier for like minorities who historically have been able to be able to make money. This means they aren't poor. Secondly, we tell you things like social media and being able to find a community of like people who are also like you, see people like you who can also make money, see a bunch of women on the world stage making money, like being investors. This point just doesn't stack up, and we don't think like that all minorities are just on social support. And then like secondly, they told us that like historical oppression this means that like when we introduce this, they're gonna like be able to trust the government more when they introduce this policy, and so like it's gonna overcount all of this like historical oppression that they face from the governments themselves. So why aren't they actually gonna be able to trust the government more? Well, we think like firstly it's because like the distrust is still there of like taking your money. If we just characterize minorities as also being rich, then they're also taking minority money. And secondly, we tell you like stories can be spun by the media whichever way they like. This looks like media companies like One News or like Fox News or like CNN or whoever taking these stories of increasing tax brackets and spinning them in an extremely negative light. But minorities are extremely vulnerable people in this because, like, as we've explained, historical oppression, they distrust the government. And so when we have these stories being spun in a negative light, it doesn't mean that they're going to be just magically trusting the government more when we increase tax progressivity. And and so at the end, and then like furthermore, they told us like that minorities are going to feel like less of a burden to society when we like decrease their tax rates. So firstly, we tell you like when you decrease someone's tax rate, like how is it going to make them feel like they're less of a burden to society? It obviously makes them feel like you need to change something, like they're not able to keep up with themselves. And secondly, like who are we actually talking about here? Are we talking about like disabled people who aren't able to actually have a job? We think that like their whole life seem to be like disabled, and so like they're going to understand like that they're not a burden, and like they're going to understand that it's just society and like the sort of expectations and the lack of accommodations is why they're unable to have a job, not because of like they're a burden to society, and we don't think they're able to fix it on that side of the house. So at the end of this point, we see that they just do not benefit minorities, which is what the entire case has revolved around so far. Therefore, they have lost this debate. And then like moving on to stereotypes. So what do we hear about like stereotypes from the negating team? They told us like firstly that like rich people are removed from the cycles of inequality. Why aren't they? Well, firstly, we tell you that like rich people tend to be involved in multiple communities. They own businesses in multiple communities across the world. Therefore, they are seeing and experiencing the cycles of inequality. This means that they aren't actually removed from it, and like they claim, they actually are aware of this in our society. And like furthermore, the money incentive, like if rich people want to be able to make money, this means that they must be aware of like where people are, who's able to spend money. If they're like trying to have a business that's revolved around like fancy cars, they're obviously aware like some people aren't able to afford that. So like that point just doesn't even make sense. And then like furthermore, they told us like the stereotype of like rich people not being rich people about being able to like pay their fair share, and they basically said that like now people are going to think that they are paying their fair share when we up their tax bracket. Why isn't this true? Well, firstly, like even if they are like being taxed more, we think that like it's historical like things that have been going on for thousands of years about the divide between the rich and the poor. This looks like monarchies with the rich and like wealth, and like Marie Antoinette and like the poor who just hated her because of this. And it's like obviously it's like a huge divide, and like just like increasing their tax isn't going to make everyone think that everything's perfectly fair. They don't get that on their side of the house. And then like thirdly, of stereotypes, they told us that like preconceived notions of poor people are just going to be destroyed because again the rich are being held accountable. Why isn't this true? Well, firstly, we think that like poor people have other things to care about. Are they really just caring about economies, or are they caring about making and meeting their like day-to-day needs, like being able to put the bread on the table like they were explaining to us? What does this mean? It means that like they aren't knowledgeable about like the economics, or like they don't care about the whole economics of how it works, about like progressivity of like tax schemes. So they aren't like. So these notions aren't destroyed because they don't actually think that the rich are being held accountable. They aren't even aware of it. And secondly, we tell you that like the notions are destroyed because the rich people aren't being held accountable. Another reason why this is because they have access to lawyers. We don't see that like rich people like have the money. Lawyers are expensive. Lawyers that are good lawyers as well are also extremely expensive. Rich people have access to these, able to exploit the loopholes that is going to allow them to like actually like exploit the tax holes in our society. Moving on to my split point about the less wealthy in our society. So firstly, we tell you there's a phenomenon where like with you increase progressivity, it becomes more likely a middle class person will firstly earn more, move into that next tax bracket, be taxed more, and then ultimately like be losing even more money than they did before. This just makes it much worse for them, like the middle class in the middle. They claimed it will remain unchanged. It doesn't. They earn less. And also they're less incentivized to earn more and like increase their like overall wealth. Secondly, we tell you that the cost of living is going to bite them. We explained to you at first when unresponded to that the rich are likely to like just be able to like cut corners and like increase prices and like pass the cost on. Also, the poor people are at the bottom of the chain. They're the first workers to go when the rich feel like they're getting pinched. This means that the middle class again just losing heaps of money and unable to put the food on the table like the AF seems to care about. So what do we see at the end of this point? We see that the middle class is important. They're the largest group in our society who have the potential to grow our economy, and the AF team just doesn't care about them, and therefore we won this debate.
I thank the speaker for their speech, and will welcome the third speaker of the affirmative team to the floor.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let's think about what Hawke's Bay needs to do to win. They need to do two things. One, prove that we get no tax, and secondly, provide a significant benefit. They are unable to do that when they spend most of their time trying to say rich people don't want to pay tax. But they are unable to meet the first condition either, when the entire push is based on the strange premise that rich people are all homogenous. They all don't care about other people. They are all selfish, and they want to spend their time messing with tax loopholes. I'll be doing a couple of things in my speech. Firstly, characterize rich people for you. This should be a first layer response. Secondly, talk about why we still get the tax and why that is really important, even if you engage at our worst case, before talking about societal discrimination and growth. Alright, the thing we really don't agree on is what rich people care about. They try to say rich people care exclusively about money. Sure, this is true, but that's a little imbalanced, right? On our side of the house, Jordan gave you analysis as to why they have other incentives.
Pure.
The fundamental reason here is that money isn't that important. Look, if I ask you if you have $100 million, how much more mathematical utility can you get from $5 million more? It's really intangible. Most people can't comprehend what that amount of money means. Two more reasons here. Because firstly, they have fundamentally far more resources than an average person needs. And secondly, they just have the freedom, they have the influence. So therefore, money is not that important. Jordan gave you analysis to why they want reputation, why they want influence, why they still want to grow and contribute. We heard no response here. But two more incentives for you. Firstly, we think some rich people are nice. They kind of feel like it's unfair to other people when they grew up in an easy life with lots of money. Therefore, they have a psychological implicit push to offset this by contributing to society. And secondly, even if you buy the analysis that rich people are really selfish, they still want to pay tax. Why is this? Because more money, as I told you, is really, really intangible. And therefore, subconscious things like making myself feel like a better person is more important. Even if they are selfish, they want to think, oh, if I pay tax, if I contribute, engaging at a completely selfish level, I still feel good about myself. I feel like a good person, which is a massive benefit on top of paying tax, or on top of having a lot of money. At the end of this, what do you see? Even if you buy all the analysis, there are still multiple pathways as to why rich people will necessarily pay this tax, why they will have incentives to contribute to their society. I'll talk more about this later. Before I move on, I'll take a point if you have one.
Do rich people evade tax?
Sometimes they do. There is a massive opportunity cost, though. Your burden is to prove that all rich people avoid tax to try and knock out our benefit. That is completely untrue. Okay, firstly, I will talk about outcomes for the disadvantaged. Why is this really, really important? This is most important when they try spending 60% of their first speech negating this. It's really, really important when we provide the most tangible benefit to the most disadvantaged people in our group. The premise is that rich people don't like to pay tax, and they have a couple of pathways. They keep stocks, they find loopholes, fly to Switzerland, and they get tax advice. I have a couple of additional responses here. Note that they do two things. One, rebut their rebuttal, and secondly, prove why rich people get taxed. Note that I don't have to prove they apply to every single person. We only need to prove to you that some people will respond to these incentives. Firstly, governments know how money works. I'm sorry, Hawke's Bay. Governments have knowledge, governments have legal advice, and they are probably going to change this policy. Two reasons. One, because they are the government, they have the free whim to do so. Secondly, they have incentives because they want their legal system to appear strong, and that's on top of wanting to give more benefits to the more disadvantaged people in society. That's my first response. Second layer, rich people probably don't really care about having more money. I told you about this. They have more than they can comprehend. They don't understand what in utilitarian terms money means to them. That additional amount of money, it's not really important. Thirdly, sometimes they just can't be bothered, right? Look, if you have a lot of money, what would you rather do? Spend your time researching tax loopholes, paying an insane amount to a lawyer, or getting along, having an easier life, which even at the cost of having slightly less money, which doesn't make any sort of tangible difference to you. Fourth layer, they have reputations, they have pressures. Look, under both sides of the house, there is pressure for rich people to appear good. But why is this mutually exclusive? It's mutually exclusive at the point in time where a progressive tax system increases attention, increases pressure, increases the just societal expectation that rich people should pay more. Fifth layer of analysis here, sometimes there are legal consequences or backlash. Two parts to this. Firstly, in the worst case, you run to Switzerland, you run to Malaysia, but you get thrown in a jail, and you might have legal consequences in the courtroom. This is true even if it's a decade down the road. Why is this trade-off necessarily a terrible decision? Because I think rich people would rather pay a little more tax than to have to suffer all the emotional stress, all the dangers, and the risks of going in prison. Yeah, prison sucks. Second layer of analysis, they probably don't want backlash. They probably don't want everyone hating them. Two impacts here. One, it makes them feel bad. Secondly, it probably hurts their businesses. At the end, what do we see here? We give you 5 independent pathways to why rich people will pay tax. Look, they tried mitigating this. It's not enough to generalize rich people. Okay, 2 impacts at the end of this. Firstly, even if only one rich person is taxed, it's still ridiculously important. Because 20% of a billionaire is still a lot of money. Taxing only one rich person is going to provide school care for lots of children. It's going to provide food for hundreds of families. Look, we think we get more. That is really uncharitable to us. But secondly, is growth, is improvement over time. Look, if you are on the margins, if you're able to get food, you are more likely to be able to get a job, raise a family. We think this is really important. Fundamentally, it is impossible for them to win when they are unable to prove this is untrue. But even if you don't buy that, next I will talk about societal discrimination. Look, they spend hardly any material on this, and we think providing the most tangible pathway to you is really important. Flowing on to my first flash, what do you see here? You see poorer people have more opportunities. We think this is the most tangible possible form of reversing societal discrimination. What does this look like? This looks like more minorities in the workplace. This looks like more minorities, people on the margins, having better performances in school, having a better quality of life. Look, I think most forms of societal discrimination are based on systematic and utilitarian inequalities. We are fundamentally able to win this clash when we prove that by getting more tax, we fundamentally reverse this. What did they say? They tried asserting societal discrimination is not a problem because minorities aren't poor. Yeah, I think on average they probably are, right? They are probably disadvantaged for societal and institutionalized reasons. They are unable to win this clash. At the end of this debate, what do you see? You see the burden on Hawke's Bay is proving we get no tax, and secondly, they have to provide something that outweighs that. They are fundamentally unable to do both when we give you more nuanced analysis, more pathways on why there will be at least one, but also probably multiple and a ridiculous amount of people who actually pay this tax, who actually provide this benefit. They never rebut it or tried outweighing our implications there. We win on that alone. Proud to affirm.
Alright, I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite the third speaker of the negative team to close out the substantive portion of today's debate.
The Affirmative team is trying to uproot the fundamentals of capitalism, which we all ride on today, without providing substantial reasons as to why that system of wealth inequality is going to change and how it is going to change, why government incentives are going to change. That is what I'm going to clear up for you in my speech today. But firstly, just because I'm hosting 3 points of clash. Firstly, is the progressive tax system going to work like they say? Secondly, who achieves benefits to for the minorities in society? And thirdly, who is going to enhance the economy, which we believe is our path to victory when we prove to you we get more material benefits on our side, right? Before I do any of that, I would like to tackle the characterization of rich people, which has sort of plagued this debate thus far, right? They came out at third to try and clear this up by saying billionaires aren't homogenous thinkers. We believe they do have ethics to some degree. We believe they have some sort of moral responsibility to care about the lower class, right? Let's look at what a billionaire is, because as I set up from first, we're talking about the top 1%, which yes, we contested, but let's work on their grounds anyways. Is there an ethical billionaire? No, there is not. A billionaire is an inconceivable amount of money that you make by exploiting people below you. Why is this? Because $1 billion is something no human can make in their lifetime if they're simply starting from scratch and working hours upon hours a day, right? We believe we see very hard workers under the status quo in developing countries working many more hours than rich people, but not getting nearly the same amount of money. They do not have the same economic capital. They do not win the birth lottery. We believe that billionaires are only there for exploiting the the people below them. We see them with Mark Zuckerberg stealing the idea for Facebook from some people he went to uni with. We believe there's so many examples of how rich people do this, right? With that in mind, we see under our side, when we actually complete this narrative for people like doctors and engineers, sure, we can see they don't have those negative stereotypes, and we do concede, they do include them in this debate, right? Because they still earn a large amount of money, they still earn a large tax bracket, probably the highest tax bracket in most countries, because we don't see billionaires in most countries, right? Simply because there's only maybe 300 billionaires in the world, and they're usually not in the majority of countries. I'm widening this debate right now, as you can see. Right. First point of clash about who is this protect system going to work. Yes, if we are able to win on this point and prove to you by the incentives of rich people to keep accumulating that wealth and not and the opportunity cost of them potentially going to jail is less, we're able to win this debate because they cannot claim any of their benefits, right? They want to try and say down the line that, they're not going to do it because they're going to break the law, right? I have a couple of responses to this. Firstly, lots of rich people break the law all the time, as I already flagged, like people that work as stockbrokers. There's the Wall Street scandals and things like that. Rich people are not exactly morally above the law. Secondly, right, they are likely to break the law at the point where they are losing 2% of when they have their money in a bank of $10 billion. That is a huge amount of money, and when they lose that money, it's going to, they're going to write, people, stakeholders, they're going to raise their eyebrows. They're not going to want to invest in their business anymore. That affects people, especially at the lowest level, who, as we told you at Isabella, are going to be the first ones cut off. When the profit margins of these companies start to go down, they're going to lay off workers, which the vast majority of them are going to be lower class, if you want to claim that they have benefits there, right? I also want to try and say, the government are actually aware when rich people have money and things like properties and things like that, and they will get taxed, right? There are incentives of the government to not have a capital gains tax, right? Firstly, it's very unpopular, even under the status quo, when we have in an election year and things like that. This is why we don't have a capital gains tax in New Zealand in the 2023 budget, because you lose that constituency, you lose those rights, right? But secondly, we believe when they take their money out of stocks in order to pay for these taxes, right? We get markets crashing. We get people seeing these rich people taking their bonds out as quickly as possible, and people losing faith in that system. When people lose faith in that system, companies are likely to go down in value, which means they're going to lay off workers in order to cover themselves, in order to keep making a profit and keep their business alive. That is how we get people with these jobs, right? They also want to try and claim that we believe that rich people aren't going to obey the law because they can't be bothered buying lawyers. I'm sorry, at the point at which they're actually losing billions of dollars and they have stakeholders looking over them constantly, they have their reputation behind them, their media reputation, we believe they are going to spend a little bit of cash just to get a few really good lawyers, right? And then they also wanted to try and say under this that rich people have so much money that it's no longer important to them. So it's a thing of diminishing returns sort of theory or whatever. But we believe it's what the wealth symbolizes at that point. When most billionaires come from generational wealth, what does that generational wealth do? It gives you status. It's a reputational signal. You're mostly low in these high up communities, and you have friends in these high rich communities. What this means is that when you lose that amount of wealth and when you lose that lose that status for a little bit, you are devalued. A lot of these billionaires place their value in their wealth. That's what they spend ages of time doing, right? When we take that away from them, they're not they're not going to want to lose that, because that is when their self-identity crumbles, and that is they genuinely have their self-interest at heart. That what we built at the end of this clash, we believe that we have able to prove to you why rich people are going to be vast incentives to do things like tax evasion, which is going to lead to extreme harms like bank collapses, as I will go on to prove. Now, I'll take a PR.
If wealth symbolizes influence, symbolizes power, isn't it the amount of money they make, not the amount of money they keep after tax?
We believe people aren't looking at tax receipts, they're just going to see the easiest number, which is usually the number that comes up under tax. Right. How do we benefit the most less fortunate in society, right? They wanted to try and say that the government has good incentives to put money in the pockets of the poor, right? Why are they not going to do this? Firstly, poor people are not a very huge voting block for governments, right? Because they're usually time poor, they might be working multiple jobs, they might not be their constituents, right? And they're not their constituency, governments aren't really going to care. Secondly, though, upping the benefits usually only increases inflation because like you're pumping more money into the economy, which leads to rising prices. People can't buy things. This is why these policies to like up the benefit are like pretty unpopular with conservatives, right? Because they believe, oh, we're just pumping more money into the economy and getting prices get higher, right? We believe the government is not going to want to implement this policy on their ground, right? But then they wanted to try and argue the principal point that like governments need to care because they need to like have an obligation to the poor, as they sort of like try to rebut us at analysis at third, right? Firstly, if this is true, why don't we see it under our side? We have like if this principal obligation, how does that change? Secondly, governments are held to accountable by powerful constituencies. This is the rich. This is why the rich have insane political capital in order to like boycott the utilities. This is what Ella was going on about. And here's the second point. Like rich people who own private hospitals in the United States can literally bargain with the government and say, we are going to shut our facilities and no longer operate our hospital here. The huge impacts of that is that people are no longer have access to healthcare. Large things that are owned privately, that's really bad. Right, I'll quickly move on. Before I move on to my economy point, I just want to quickly touch on this thing that we had in the debate about the perception of the rich. Is this going to be debate-winning material? No, it's not. Look, we might see a slight increase in animosity, like, which we believe at the point of which, like, if we see visual wealth all the time, we're going to see visual wealth on both sides of the house. But even if, like, we're able to, like, lose that point, we don't believe that's going to be a huge harm in today's debate. Like, we don't see, like, poor people going out to, like, hunt down the rich because they're rich. It's just not a reasonable assumption. There's a sense check there, right? Like, let's see in the decrease, like, boosting the economy. We told you, like, a decrease in cash doesn't affect the poor. Again, where do we let when there's the first to let go, rich people are the first ones to let lower class people go when their companies fail. Therefore, we're not going to get an increase in the economy. We're going to get less productiveness in the economy when there's less transactions happening between things, when money is just being held in stocks. It is useless. Who is the team that provides the economic models that allow people in low income classes to thrive? It is Team Hawke's Bay. Vote Neg.
I thank the speaker for her speech. Now, as is tradition, for reasons unknown to all, we will now reverse the speaking order, so I invite the leader of the negating team for their reply.
Conclusion.
The Affirmative team has ran a case today that only works in an idyllic world where the rich care about the poor. Hawke's Bay tells you that the rich don't care, they do evade, they cut corners, they raise prices. Increasing progressivity in tax just hurts everyone. Two main points on this today that I'll discuss is how we prove to you that we simply do get less tax under their model, and secondly, the harms that occur even if this model works and how this affects poor and minority groups. Before I continue, I'm just going to clarify the characterization of the rich that we've seen a lot in today's debate. We told you from the start that rich people want money and they want to perpetrate their wealth. We heard a lot from the Affirmative team how they want to feel good inside, they care about people, and even if it's only a few, it still stands. We heard from Bex there's no ethical billionaire. The 1% that they claimed in their model are not caring, and so we see that this characterization still stands. Although they still claimed that even if only a few people care, it's going to make a difference. We told you at Bex this simply isn't true. This is not enough money to fund all of the benefits they want to see under their side of the house. On to the first point of clash, which is will it work? What we heard in the Affirmative team's model is that the poor and middle class tax is going to stay the same, rich people are going to get taxed more, and we're going to get more money. What we told you is that rich people keep their money in areas that avoids tax, like stock markets, like trust funds. They told us that the government knows this is happening and the government can control this. They gave us no actual reasons for how, and because we don't see it under the status quo, this does not stand. Secondly, we told you that rich people are likely to leave to tax havens and other loopholes like that such. All we heard from them is that they're not going to want to leave their family. We told you the rich people's main incentive is to perpetrate their wealth. We told you we're more likely to see corruption in tax systems when the rich have more of an incentive to try and create more profit. All we heard was that they don't want to break the law. Firstly, yes they do. We told you that at Bex. But also we told you that they don't need to at Isabella because these loopholes exist. This also doesn't stand. At the end of this flashpoint, we've told you that by angering the rich, by taxing them more, We are going to lose money in our domestic economies. This is extremely important because when we're not getting this tax, none of the benefits from the affirmative team stand in this debate. Secondly, even if it does, we told you the harms that it can create. We told you that companies are going to cut corners. We told you we're going to create a stagnant economy. All we heard from them is, no, we don't, because poor people can afford stuff now and they're going to contribute to our economy. We told you this isn't realistic. The luxury items that actually fuel our economy and the things above the basic benefit, the basic necessities in life, those are the things that fuel our economy. We told you that the rich, no matter how much, the poor cannot afford this with the limited tax that we get under the affirmative side. We told you the main outcome of this was going to be a recession. We told you it's going to increase inflation. We told it's going to make it harder for the poor when they don't have a job and they can't afford products when rich cut corners. We got literally no response from this, how this recession is going to occur. So even if you buy it can happen, they have not responded to our vast reasons about how we affect poor people. Thirdly, we told you about upping benefits of why this increases inflation. We told you how it's not going to benefit the poor. So we told you that any of the mechanisms they provided don't stand. We see this as very important because both teams in this debate have highlighted the poor people as the people who need tax the most. So what we've provided you is reasons why we don't get enough tax to support the poor people. And even if we did, why rich people are incentivized to cut corners, incentivized to create things like literally firing these people from their jobs so they can create more profit. This has so many negative effects on poor people. They are not benefiting. We are disrupting our economies across the world. Hawke's Bay tells you that the status quo simply works better side neck.
I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite the leader of the affirmative team to close us out for this round.
Three, two, one. Adjudicator, one rich person agreeing with our model and agreeing with morals in general looks like benefits to millions. It looks like benefits to the education system, looks like benefits to healthcare. Look, those are the grounded impacts that we think are really, really important. I don't think the recession happening is something that you should really care about because they never told you why a recession is inherently harmful. Look, we gave you grounded impacts that are really, really important, and that's what you should care about in today's debate. What will I do in my speech? Firstly, on a characterization. Secondly, does it work? Thirdly, on the economy. Fourthly, how do minorities get impacted? Firstly, on the characterization. Look, I think you should buy our characterization at the point in time that rich people care about the poor because they interact with their business at the very least, but we also tell you that they just feel bad and that rich people are human. Look, even if we go with Hawke's Bay characterization, rich people want to improve their social image, and that's all the analysis we gave you. Look, what doesn't improve your social image is that the New York Times running a story about how you've left the country because you don't want to pay tax, because you don't care about people on the margins, that you don't care about benefiting society. Look, that's the thing that decreases your social image, and that's the thing that is really, really harmful and hurts Hawke's Bay. Alright, on to does it work? What material do we hear here? Firstly, that on loopholes. Secondly, that rich people will just invest, and thirdly on brain drain. Look, I think Hawke's Bay literally has to prove that every single person and every single company will skip and evade this in order for this point to actually work and for all the harms to materialize that they gave at first. Look, why does that not happen? Quickly, A, most people don't want to break the law. B, there's societal pressure in terms of boycotting. 3, rich people are relatively hedonistic. They like to feel good. They like to think that they're saving people. They like to feel good in general. And look, like all the material about we gave you that Bill Gates literally donates to feel good himself. I think this is just another form of donating to society, to those that need it. But secondly, we tell you that that means we at least just get, also we just flipped on backlash, right? They're likely to pay in order just to look more favourable to their consumers in general, and that means that they probably just just won't create loopholes because of all the reasons why creating loopholes looks really, really bad for your business. But secondly, we tell you that what that means is that we're able to get at least marginal increases in tax incentives. Look, why is a marginal increase really, really important? Because a marginal increase looks like not having tattered textbooks in schools. It looks like people being able to bring like sandwiches to work and being able to eat. It looks like people being able to absorb learning because they're not wondering about when their next meal is because they're worried about their parents not being able to pay. It looks like parents not being worried that they're going to have to live in a car because they can't pay their rent. Those are the grounded impacts that are really, really important. That's what you need to care about, not the recession. Alright, onto the economy then. What do they say? They tell us that jobs will be cut and that poor people can't contribute to the economy. What did we tell you? We tell you that when poor people have more money in hand, it means that more money goes to the businesses, and that means that businesses are likely to agree with this in general because they just get more money, and that probably negates some of the tax benefits at the point in time that they're able to get that money. That means they're also more likely to pay. But look, it's like rich people just lose out on maybe some luxury goods. Maybe they can't buy an extra Ferrari. We don't care about that. We care about the person that is now able to pay that rent because of that 10% decrease in tax, and that's really, really important. But secondly, we told you that poor people are able to upskill and get better jobs to contribute to the economy at the point in time that they are able to contribute to learning and then start to break out of these toxic cycles because now they're probably able to go to uni because they have slightly more money and maybe can afford things like that. Those are really, really important impacts. We told you that poor people are just an incredibly large group, right? We agreed on the characterization that rich people are 1%. What that means is poor people are just a larger group of people and in such are way, way more important. But fourthly, we told you that the government has ways to regulate inflation. Look, I think inflation doesn't really matter. We're in a recession now, but it's not that bad, right? But fifthly, look, you just get backlash for people when the governments want to make more profit. They still need more workers because they're making more profit, and that means you get more jobs, and that's really, really important for those on the margins that need that extra job to be able to let their children go to school. At the end of that, I think the recession and material that we hear about the economy is relatively weak at the point in time. They don't ground it on the impacts on the ground. We give you impacts to people, and that's really, really important. Proud to stand.
Alright, I thank all speakers for an incredibly high energy debate given the 7 a.m. start. You guys may cross the floor, I'll stop the stream, and then we'll all leave so as to do this.
I'm